Welcome to the Cutting the Gordian Knot podcast. Today I'm joined by Sal DiStefano, progenitor of MindPump, where they pump both body and mind. But as of late, they've been pumping something else, something a bit more spiritual, even Catholic. So to find out what exactly that is, Sal has joined me, for reasons beyond my comprehension, to discuss exactly that. Sal, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on. This is a pleasure. So I'm ready to do this. Have a good time. Yeah.
Well, thanks for being here. So the title of this show is Cutting the Gordian Knot. And the point is that there's many issues which are very tangled and difficult to understand, but there can be out-of-the-box ways to cut through that chaos and noise. Fitness certainly is such a thing. We have the people who believe that the kettlebell is the second coming. There's the cult of CrossFit. There are the Liver King people and his Liver King peasants.
Yeah.
It's a pretty confusing space. We got bro science, real science, and bad science. How exactly do we know what exactly we should be following? What tools and heuristics do you use to sort fact from fiction, things that we should listen to and things that we should reject? And I'm interested to see how have developing those tools in the fitness space influenced your ability to evaluate different faiths?
Yeah. Great question. I think on its surface, we look at fitness and health. We look at diet, losing weight or trying to improve our health, and we look at it like it's a series of inputs. Okay, well, if I eat this and don't eat that, and if I do this and I don't do that, then I should get this product and this result. And there is some truth to that, but that greatly underestimates the challenge around those things, because it doesn't take into consideration many times that we're human beings and that we develop relationships with the things that we engage in on a regular basis. And that includes exercise, but it especially includes diet. Very few of us eat food on a regular basis because it's fuel. You often hear this on social media by fitness fanatics. Food is fuel. Like, very few people eat food simply because it's fuel. And now it is fuel, that's true. And it does consist of proteins, fats, and carbohydrates and calories. But food means a lot more than that. Food is emotion. It could be good emotion. It could be bad emotion. It's celebration. It's how we bond with each other. And it's culture. I mean, if I say Italian food, you have a picture in your mind of what that looks like. If I say Mexican food, same thing. Or I could say something like breakfast foods or lunch foods or dinner foods. Or I could say something like, you're at a birthday party, you're probably going to eat what? Or you're at the movies, what are you probably going to eat, right? So food is very complex, to say the least. And so if you're looking for an approach that gets you to a healthy place long term, you have to look at this as a series of behaviors and work from there. How do I change my behaviors around food, my relationship around food, in fundamental ways to where it sticks, to where I'm not white knuckling it the whole time? By the way, there's a lot of parallels around nutrition and exercise and fitness and the spiritual practice. And I learned this becoming a Christian. It's remarkable how similar they are. Of course, one being far more profound than the other. But the same thing is true with exercise. If I go to the gym and just move, well, that accomplishes something. But what I'm looking for is developing a relationship with exercise to where it's something I want to do. Let me put it to you this way, Jake. If the average person could want to eat healthy and want to be active, then it would never be a struggle. And that's the goal. The goal is, how do I get to that place? How do I develop this relationship to where this isn't a white knuckling challenge all the time? This is just the way that I live. And there is a process to doing that. By the way, just to back up what I'm saying, if you look at the data on the fail rate of diets, of any diet, they all are right around 85 to maybe 90% fail rate. Meaning, if you were to lose 30 pounds, there's a 90% chance, roughly, that you'll gain it back within a year or two. In other words, millions, to put it differently, millions of Americans lose weight every single year. So we don't have a weight loss challenge or issue. The issue is keeping it off. Everybody gains it back and then some. So that's what we need to look at. Now, as a trainer, when I trained people and I managed gyms and I trained other trainers, the first 5 years of my career, it was all about eat this, eat that, do this, do that. And our short-term success rate was great. because I'm very motivating and I can get people to do things. But my long-term success rate was terrible. And after about 5 years of doing that, I really took a hard look at my success rate and said, I have barely any people that are able to maintain this on their own for the rest of their lives. And if I'm being honest with myself, I'm failing people. So I need to really start to figure this out, and help people in the right way. And for people watching right now who are looking for some tangibles, I'll give you one real base root place to start. And then there's steps above that, but just one base place to start, and I'll start with the negative. I'll start with how people do this the wrong way. Typically, when people embark on a diet or look to starting a journey to changing their diet, it almost always comes from a negative place, or it almost always comes from a place of, for lack of a better term, self-hate. So it's, I'm fat, or I'm unattractive, or I'm inadequate, and I don't want to be that anymore. I don't want to be whatever anymore. Maybe you saw a picture of yourself, or maybe you played with your kids and got out of breath, or maybe somebody made a comment, or maybe you tried on a pair of pants that you haven't worn in a while. But it starts from that negative place. Well, when you approach fitness from that place, exercise becomes a punishment. You are punishing yourself for being overweight, let's just say. This is why those early workouts in that initial state, those early workouts that are real hard, the kind that make you feel like you want to throw up, actually feel a bit cathartic. Like you leave the gym, somebody asks you, hey, how was your workout? I know you just started. You're like, oh my God, it was great. I barely walked out, or I could barely crawl out of the gym. It's cathartic to punish yourself when you hate yourself. Diet becomes restrictive, right? I can't have this. I can't have that. I don't either deserve it, or because I'm inadequate or fat or whatever, I can't have those things. Long term, that's a terrible approach, because you can only hate yourself for so long, which, by the way, this is why people rebel in the opposite direction when they go off, right? You don't typically see somebody go off a diet by having a couple cookies. It typically looks like a box of cookies. It's that rebellion from hating yourself. Now, I offer an alternative. What if you look in the mirror, you notice you're overweight, and you say, you know what? I haven't been taking care of myself, and I deserve to be cared for. I deserve to be healthy. I should care for myself like somebody I care about. And then you approach exercise and diet in that way. Well, now exercise becomes self-care, and diet becomes nourishment. How can I eat? How can I eat in a way to care for myself? By the way, just to add more to this, as if I haven't sold it enough, balance is baked into that. Okay, because it's true that sometimes caring for myself is having some pizza with my friends that I haven't seen in a while, and balance sometimes means taking a day off of the gym because I'd rather hang out with my wife and connect with her. Right. So that balance is naturally baked into that because it comes from a place of self-care. And if you start there, the rest is a lot easier. If you do this because you hate yourself, I can't eat that because I'm overweight or unhealthy or gross or whatever, or I have to go to the gym because I hate myself. You will overtrain, inappropriately exercise, and your diet will always, even if the diet you eat is healthy, you will rob yourself of the joy that comes from improving your health. Instead, it's going to feel very restrictive. And so that's the starting point where you want to come. Now, the how does this relate to spirituality? And we don't have to go in this direction just yet. But when I first became a Christian and I learned about the Holy Spirit and how the Holy Spirit transforms your desires, and experienced it myself, I said, oh, it's like I want to do these things, and I'm not sitting here white knuckling it.
I was a Protestant for a long time. I was a Protestant, raised more fundamentalist. Then I lost the faith, became an atheist. And then eventually I got all the way to Catholicism. And what you just described, that process of like a self-hatred, like, I'm terrible. And then the move to just restrict and then binge sounds just like a fundamentalist Christian story, where they start with this more Calvinistic idea of total depravity. Like, there is nothing good about me. And when you have absolutely nothing good about you, well, then how are you going to treat yourself? So that's where we get this incredibly hardworking Protestant work ethic, which can be healthy, but it can also be destructive. That's where you
Yeah.
get the puritanical mode of spirituality, where they're like, no dancing, no alcohol, no tobacco, no this. They're overly restricting the good things which they ought to have in a balanced life. What you're describing sounds a lot like the physical version of Catholicism, where St. Thomas Aquinas says the goal that we're aiming at is happiness. Now, he believes that happiness is ultimately found in God, the Sunum Bonum. But that sounds a lot more like what you're saying, that we have problems, but we're also good and something good to work with in and of ourselves. So we're things which are on a journey, not perfected, but can be perfected. So that it always strikes me when I hear you
Yeah.
guys on your podcast describing what does and doesn't lead to having a healthy body. And it is in lockstep with what does and doesn't work with having a healthy spirit. And it makes sense because, especially as Catholics, we have an incarnational faith. So the body and divinity of Christ, this one person, body, blood, soul, and divinity, is brought into union in Christ. So it should be no surprise that the spiritual life and the corporal life should also be brought into unity, and those same things ought to be shared.
Yeah. Well, and I make this case all the time. In fact, I moved towards Christ by interviewing Bishop Barron years ago. And I was at that point agnostic.
Okay.
But
So that was the spark, was talking to Bishop Barron?
Oh yeah. I sat down
Okay.
and I saw him on YouTube at the time. Jordan Peterson actually opened me up to the wisdom of the Bible,
okay.
which I think Jordan Peterson's done that for a lot of people. Because he
yeah.
talks, and I'd opened my mind to there's wisdom here. There's actual wisdom here. So I hadn't taken the leap of faith yet. I hadn't believed in the metaphysical yet, but I said, there's wisdom here. And I was watching his videos, and Bishop Barron was a recommended video where he actually talked about Jordan Peterson. So I watched it. I said, wow, I really like the way that he communicates. And he comes out, he's very, very intelligent man, and he communicates in an intellectual way. And that's one way to get to me, is through my mind. And I started watching some of his videos, and I wanted him on our show. And I remember, by the way, this was 6 years ago. Seems like the culture shifted, but 6 years ago, I remember there was a little bit of resistance, like, okay, we're gonna have a Catholic bishop on a health and fitness podcast. How's our audience gonna react? And luckily, my co-hosts and I are very much we'll do what we want anyway, type of attitude. So we did it, and I interviewed him. And at the time, I was agnostic, and I felt God pulling at me for sure. And every question I asked him was genuine. It was like what I wanted to know. But my point with this is, when I met with him, I met Father Steve, which is helps him produce the Word on Fire podcast. Father Steve is a priest, and he's this like looks like a little bodybuilder. So I remember he introduced me. I meet him, and he's just like this like buffed priest, and I'm like, oh my gosh,
Nice.
you lift weights? And he goes, yeah. Why do you think we were letting you interview Bishop Barron? I listened to your podcast. I said, oh my gosh, this is great. So we started talking, and he pointed a few things out about fitness that are absolutely true. Fitness is one of the most powerful vehicles for personal growth. And I firmly believe that if you follow that journey long enough, that you will eventually you will start to question and examine spiritual health. And I believe that will eventually lead you to Christ. But the reason why fitness is such a powerful vehicle is because it's the most unassuming. You don't know you're on this personal growth journey. You just want to get abs, or you just want to look good, or you just want to get fit. But if you do it long enough and you start to figure out the right way, which is kind of what I'm talking about, self-acceptance starts to become something that you figure out. Because, I learned this as a teenage boy, realizing I would never look like Arnold, but I'm going to keep doing this anyway, right? So a little self-acceptance. You develop discipline. So you're very disciplined. You put in some work. Here's what you get. You appreciate and respect different people because you see them doing this personal growth thing as well. I mean, one of the most, I hate to use this word because it's so politicized, doesn't mean what it's supposed to mean anymore, but one of the most inclusive, quote unquote, places in the world is a gym. You go to the gym, and people who are working hard, beginners, advanced, bodybuilders, gymnasts, overweight or not, old, young, like we're all on this thing together, and everybody's super great with each other and helpful, and somebody needs help. One of the most amazing places to visit is like a hardcore gym. You go into a hardcore gym, and you need help, like the biggest, strongest, meanest looking guy is going to bend over backwards to really get you on the right tracks. It's a great environment. So Father Steve pointed that out to me. And he also said, fitness, a lot of people eventually get to spirituality through fitness because you want to get, at first it's like, I want to look better. And then it's, oh, I like to feel better. And then it's, oh my God, there's all these mental effects, benefits. And then it's like, oh, I just enjoy the journey. And what else can I look at? And then I look at my sleep, and I look at, maybe start with meditation. And then that leads you to this. And the next you know, you're like, okay, there's something that's not complete here. And you start looking at spiritual health, it's exactly the path that I took, starting with fitness.
Wow. And it's funny you kind of got hooked with Jordan Peterson. He's big into the typology and whatnot. And something which I wish more people pointed out was the guy's name, Jordan Peterson, is perfect because what is the Jordan in Scripture?
Yeah, wow. Right, yeah.
It's the river which separates the Gentile nations from the promised land that you have to cross in order to get into the covenant people. So that's his first name. And then Peter's son, like Bar Jonah, like the son of this, son of that, right?
Yeah.
Well, he's Peter's son. In what way? Well, he's famous for, at one point, like, I'm going to die for Christ. And some of those interviews, you have him say, well, what do you mean, am I a Christian? I would die for it. And then in other times, you say, do you really think that, like, Christ resurrected? And he's like, well, I think it's kind of a typological thing where, the Jungian archetypes. It's like, this is perfect. He's the gateway into the promised land and a guy who seems to flip-flop.
Wow, I never put that together. That's remarkable, actually. That's pretty awesome.
It's funny just how often names work out. I'm doing a series on the Book of Judges right now. And I'm like, did they just switch the guy's name to make it so perfect? And I'm like, it happens in modern society too. But kind of moving back to what you said earlier, you started this whole thing off with rejecting reductionism.
Yeah.
And that's a core piece of being an atheist or a naturalist. It's embracing reductionism. And as you kind of get into the more philosophical modes, you begin to expand out what you see as real. And you didn't want to just say, okay, a burger is a bundle of carbs and fats and whatnot. It's also an experience. It also relates to the person. It relates to others. So you're rejecting that type of reductionist mode. And you find that once you do that, it allows you to operate more effectively in the fitness space.
You have to understand this. And that, these days I speak a lot to trainers and coaches because I know I can reach more, everyday people that way because they're the ones actually making the difference by working with them. And I speak to them often about this, and it's like, you have to work with people's behaviors. That's the only long-term approach and the only way you're going to find success. And knowing human psychology, knowing people's behaviors, or understanding people's behaviors, you'll have a much higher odds of success. So I'll give you another example. I'll give you a silly example, right? Okay, I could take somebody and I could say, I want you to reduce your calories by 500 calories a day. So write down all your food and eat 500 less calories a day. So that's option one. Option two, I could say, eat as much as you want. Just don't eat heavily processed foods, but eat as much as you want. Anything that is whole and natural. So, meat, rice, veggies, fruit, but eat as much as you want. Now, both of them, if you do both of them, will result in a 500 calorie reduction. We know this. The data shows us. We need a whole natural food diet versus a predominantly heavily processed food diet, which is most Americans. The calories drop by about 500 to 600 calories. Okay. So I could tell you to do either one, but one of them feels freeing. The other one feels restrictive. Cut your calories 500, restrictive. The other one is like, eat as much as you want. Oh my God, my trainer told me I could eat as much as I want. That's what I'm going to do that. And then they'd come to me and be like, what is it about Whole Foods that's so magical? I'm losing weight and I'm eating all this food. It's like, you're actually eating 500 calories less a day. No way, I'm eating so much. Yes, you are. And then we'll add it up and I'll show. I'll give you another example. I could tell you to cut your calories by 10%. Let's figure out what you're eating, cut them by 10%. Or I could say, eat like you normally do, but don't eat with a phone or in front of your TV or while distracted. Just you and your food. Both of them will result in a 10% decrease in calories, and we know this by the data. I'll give you a third option. I could tell somebody to eat these calories, eat these macronutrients. You got to eat this much protein, this much fat, this much carbs. Here's your calories, and that's fine. Or I could say, I just want you to hit this protein, and then after you eat this protein, I want you to prioritize that. Then eat until you're satisfied. Now, what ends up happening is when you do that, you end up eating appropriate amount of calories without having to count, having to count all these other things. One of them lends themselves better to human behavior and feels more freeing, and also teaches somebody how to live in the real world. The other one is restrictive, controlling, and robotic. I like to coach, and I found a lot of success with coaching around how you feel before, during, and after you eat. This is very important. Many of us medicate with food. Food in the short term is a great distraction and it feels good. Well, if I tell somebody to pause before eating, what I noticed as a trainer is if I had somebody pause and think about what they were about to eat and think about what they're looking to get out of that food, and then go ahead and eat like you were going to, a good 20 to 25 to 30% of the time, they would actually change the food that they were going to eat. By the way, again, spiritual connection here. Years ago, this is when we first started the podcast, before I became, before I followed Christ. We had a gentleman on the podcast, Paul Chek. He's like the godfather of wellness. Kind of a weird guy, really smart, fun guy, whatever. But anyway, we had him on the podcast, and later that night, we had him over for dinner. We all had this big dinner. And when we served him his meal, he put his hands together and he bowed his head, and he paused for like 30 seconds or a minute. And then when he came up, he started eating. I thought, well, that's strange. I didn't know Paul was religious. So I said, Paul, I saw you praying earlier. But, I didn't know you're religious. He goes, oh, I wasn't praying. He goes, I was just pausing and I was asking myself what I was trying to get out of the food, what I expected from it, how I felt, whatever. And then I ate the food. And he says, and when I do that, I tend to generally make more conscious, self-aware choices. So I feel better. And that brings me to prayer. The benefit of praying before meals. There's some dietary benefits as well. I think if you pause before you eat a Snickers bar or a cookie, and you say, and you ask God, please help this nourish me, and thank you for this opportunity, and why do I want this, Lord? Is this something that I should be eating? Please help me. Just that pausing alone, without even, I think that makes a difference. Adding God's help, and I think so. It's funny when he did that. I remember thinking, oh, I could see value in. But before I even believed in God, I saw there was value in praying before eating, just for that pause alone.
Oh, that's interesting. Especially in Catholicism, it's stressed the idea that the church is the body of Christ. And when you think, all right, I am bringing this food into the body of Christ, it's not just into me and my own private life, but this experience, this food, what it's going to do for me, I'm actually bringing this into the church in a sense. That really changes it, and prayer helps you kind of orient that. And it's interesting, you started out earlier talking about certain behaviors and then desires and how the behaviors can cultivate desires. And then you shifted into certain rules and heuristics you can use. I think that's perfect because in Christianity, we have all of the Greek schools that we get. I mean, earlier, you're basically speaking straight up Aristotelian ethics, right? That's Nicomachean ethics down the line. And now it sounds a lot more like the Jewish rabbinic tradition. Hey, there's certain rules and they're deceptively wise, and they might not target what it looks like it's targeting. Instead, it actually shapes your life in such a way which allows you to achieve an end effortlessly.
Right.
And some of these laws work well, like the one that you mentioned, don't eat processed food. And some of them, if it was the law, would just be too difficult to follow. So we would need very well-crafted laws. And then when you merge those two traditions, the Jewish and the Greek, inside of the Christian church, which draws from both, well, then you get laws which cultivate desires, which lead to virtues. And then once you have that virtue, you have a type of freedom that, well, wouldn't have been possible if you were just a slave to vice.
Yeah, very good point. Very, very good points that you're putting together. Yeah, I think the other thing to consider is this, and I think this will resonate with your audience, okay? This will definitely resonate with your audience. If you live according to the world, according to what the world tells you or how the world tells you to live, you will be fat, sick, and unhealthy, and you'll definitely be spiritually unwell as well. But we know this as Christians. We know this from a spiritual standpoint. Listen to the world, right? You're a guy, go sleep with a bunch of women, make a lot of money. Having kids is a burden. Whatever. Women, go. You'll find all your fulfillment in a career. Don't have kids. Children are a burden to the earth. Like, let's just have hedonistic fun. Whatever. We know this as Christians. Like, no, that's a false. If you live according to the world, you will be spiritually unwell. It's true for everything that the world tells you, including your health. If you listen to the world, it tells you eat because food is because of its hedonistic value. All of our markets around food are designed around hedonism. Think about this. Go to the grocery store and the top selling food in any category, including health foods, is the tastiest. This is what the markets are. Markets are amazing because they give us, because they're better than the alternatives. The drawback is they give us what we want, but not what we need. So what do we want? We want fast, and we want tasty, and we want enjoyable. And so that's what it gives us. And that's where all the money, the research and development goes into providing those things. So you brought up heavily processed foods. Some of the best data on nutrition, because diet studies are tough because they're often based off of surveys, and surveys are historically inaccurate. There's not a whole lot of studies on diet that are properly controlled, but the ones on heavily processed foods are pretty well done. Like, they'll take groups of people, put them in different rooms, watch them, don't leave the room. You eat as much as you want. You eat as much as you want. But this room here is heavily processed foods. This room is whole natural foods. They'll control for macros as well. So similar proteins, fats, and carbs. And then they'll take the groups and switch them. So it's really good. And about 600 more calories a day we'll eat with heavily processed foods. Why? They're engineered. They're engineered to be, to maximize the hedonistic value, to maximize that experience. To give you an example, a family-sized bag of Lay's potato chips has something like 4 or 5 potatoes. It would be very difficult to eat 4 to 5 plain boiled potatoes. If I put plain boiled potatoes in front of you and said, eat these, you wouldn't be able to choke them down. But I could probably get you to eat a whole bag of chips by yourself. So what they've done is they've engineered these foods to give us what we want. And the result is our natural systems of satiety, the natural systems in our body that tell us you've had enough and maybe you're satisfied now, have been hijacked. And so as a result, we overeat. And trying to eat in a way that's healthy by eating these foods that the world tells you to eat is very difficult. Good luck. Good luck eating an appropriate amount with a diet that's comprised of mostly heavily processed foods. The world also lies to us about activity. Everything's designed for us to be inactive and sedentary. And then the world says that a workout, for it to be effective, needs to beat the crap out of you. You need to sweat. You need to feel like you're going to throw up. Another lie. And then, of course, the world says if you feel a particular way, here's a pill. So in essence, and this is the part that's challenging, but I think it's good to understand and be honest about, the very act of being healthy, both physically, mentally, and spiritually, is a bit of a rebellion. So you will be living differently than most people, but the way to get there, and the way to be able to do it in a way to where you want to do it has to be from a place of self-care, has to be from a place of self-love. It also has to be from a place of awareness and understanding. Why do I reach for this food when I feel this particular way? Or knowing thyself, right? Boy, if I have potato chips in the house, then I'm probably going to overeat, so I'm not going to have them in the house. But if I really want them, I'll drive to the grocery store and grab myself a single serving of them, creating barriers between you and some of these behaviors. This general attitude, this general idea or understanding around health and fitness, if you can wrap your mind around this, and then what you add to that is appropriate exercise, right? Train your body appropriately, meaning whatever your fitness level is, even if it's down here, you just exercise just above that. Doesn't matter where you're at, you just above, just to get your body to adapt and change. That's the appropriate way to train. If you tell yourself, I'm going to feel better at the end of my workout than I did going into it, that's a good judge, by the way, a good gauge. If you feel worse after your workout, it wasn't a good workout. You should feel better, more energized. You should not feel like you have no more energy left. You should feel energized. Go into your workouts like that. go into them with this or with this attitude of, okay, I do nothing now. So let's start with step one, which is 1 day a week. Like, let's just start there, right? If you approach it from a self-care standpoint, that starts to make sense. Same thing with diet. If you take that understanding and approach these things from that place, you are on the path towards success. You are. If you go in the opposite direction, and I hate myself, and I'm doing nothing now, but now I'm going to go 5 days a week, make this happen as fast as possible, beat myself up, you know, restrict myself. That's what this feels like, but that's because I'm fat, so I need to do this type of deal, and I'll figure it out once I get there. You'll fail. You're going to fail. The odds are you're going to fail.
Totally. Yeah. I actually just changed my workout routine to 5 days a week, but I just go into the gym on my way to work. I do one exercise. It takes about 5 minutes and then I'm out. And I just hit a
Perfect.
deadlift PR this morning. And it's just one major muscle group once per week and gone. Because
Yep.
my tendency too is just to overtrain.
Yeah,
But
that's funny you say that. Our most popular program is a 15-minute a day, 5 day a week
it's plenty.
program. Yeah. I mean, that's the most people would get everything that they wanted out of health and fitness. And most people want to be mobile,
Hmm.
to feel good. Most people aren't looking to be shredded or whatever. They just want to be fit and healthy and for it to work within their life. Most people don't live for fitness, but want fitness to improve the way they live. Most people would accomplish that with a lot less than they think, especially
Right.
when it comes to strength training. You mentioned one lift every time you went in. Strength training is a wonderful form of exercise for the modern world. You get a lot for the amount of time you spend doing it. And rather than trying to burn the calories yourself, you teach your body to burn more calories on its own. You also improve your metabolic and hormonal health through the simple process of building muscle. And building muscle doesn't take a lot. Looking like a bodybuilder might take a lot. But for the average person, to build muscle to keep them pretty fit and healthy doesn't take much at all. In fact, one lift a day would be great for everybody, probably for the rest of their life, especially if you combine it
Hmm.
with regular activity otherwise, like walking, you'd be totally fine.
And, religiously, there's kind of a parallel. I know a lot of converts because, I'm in the RCIA program helping to bring people in. And a lot of them just go crazy at it first. Like they're decked out with
Yeah.
religious everything. They're going to a bazillion daily masses. And that's great. God bless them. But I think people can be surprised how just slowly getting consistent practices
Yeah.
religiously are going to pay dividends, and you can burn yourself out with anything. So you do have to slowly fade that in and allow your desire to grow. My judge of if I had a successful workout is when I leave the gym, do I say, all right, I'm excited, man, I got to go back. I'm going to get a
Yeah.
bigger pump in next time, because I know that if that's how I feel leaving the gym, I'll go back. And if I'm consistent, well, that's actually going to be the win. A lot of people get it's great to get deep in the faith, but they can feel so much burden to add additional practices and more practices,
Yeah.
sometimes ones they're not ready for. And then the consistency drops off hard and they feel like I tried it big time. And then that religion failed.
Yeah, I think, and there's another thing to add too with exercise, which is your body has a limited capacity to recover and adapt to the stress that exercise places on the body. I mean, that's why your body becomes more fit. Is it's adapting to a stress, and it's attempting to strengthen you so that next time that same insult doesn't produce the same stress. But that's why you add weight to the bar,
Mm-hmm.
or you work out harder or whatever. But there's a limited capacity, and that what determines that capacity. A lot of factors that determine that capacity, but one of them is just your current fitness level. Taking someone who's not working out and having them do more than a little is not only unnecessary, but if anything, it probably slows down their progress. What you're looking for is the perfect dose that allows your body to recover and adapt, not just recover. A lot of people get trapped in that. Just recover, heal, never train themselves appropriately enough to where the body will recover and then add on top of that, which is the adaptation. So for most people, something like 2 days a week, 45 minutes of strength training is perfect forever. I mean, there's a lot we could do within that. Or something like 15 minutes a day would be perfect forever if you combine it, especially if you combine it with daily walks and a diet where you're treating yourself well. Like, you do those things right there, and you're good for the rest of your life. It doesn't. Not only does it not need to look like an extreme athlete's workout routine, but I think a lot of people misunderstand or don't realize that happiness doesn't come at the end of that. I mean, and the data on that is very clear. Arthur Brooks, a good friend of mine, a devout Catholic, he explained the data on beauty and aesthetics. And he said you could be at, let's say, a arbitrary scale of 1 to 10, in terms of beauty, and let's say you're at a 6, and then you spend hundreds of $1,000s and hours of time getting from a 6 to a 9. He goes, it would barely budge your happiness. You wouldn't even be able to register it. Now, improving your health will make a big difference. But what I mentioned in terms of 45 minutes twice a week or 15 minutes a day with some walks, I mean, you would vastly improve your health with something like that. And like I said, most people would look the way they would be very happy with the way they look. I wish more people in my space communicated fitness that way. Unfortunately, a lot of the health and fitness information that's communicated is communicated by fitness fanatics who don't necessarily have the best, relationship with their bodies. A lot of them are body obsessed. And so what they tell you is how they feel about fitness. No days off, beat yourself up, food is fuel, type of deal. And harder is the answer to everything. It's no wonder why the fail rate is so high. No wonder why the fitness industry has existed for a while, but has barely made a dent in.
So, kind of circling back a little bit, I know we're kind of slowly going through the story with plenty of rabbit trails in between. You meet Bishop Barron, and you're an agnostic at the time.
Yeah.
You find a very buff priest. That's always a plus. What on earth brought you? Well, first, two sets of questions. What was keeping you an agnostic? Were there any arguments or ideas which kind of secured that? And then what drew you into being interested in what Bishop Barron was saying?
So I'll back up a little bit. So I grew up, I was baptized, but we weren't practicing Catholics or Christian. We would go to church on Christmas. Sometimes that was about it. Grew up with great morals, great ethics. My mom would, she says she has a relationship to God, but we just didn't practice it. But I was always searching. It was always something that I always pondered. And my searching, as a teenager led me to think that the material world was all that there was. And so I became an atheist. I didn't remain atheist for very long. At some point, I'd say in my 20s, I found sounds weird, but I found quantum physics fascinating and learned about some of the experiments that they would conduct, like the double slit experiment, entanglement, all that stuff. And I remember being like, that's weird. Like, that sounds like magic. Like, what's going on? And then I had this thought, like, how arrogant I am to say that there is no God. Like, how do I know? So I became kind of more agnostic, but I stayed there for a bit. I didn't really ponder it that much further. Fast forward, I'm in my late 20s. I discover, again, this is going to sound weird connection, but I discover Ron Paul, the great libertarian.
Sure.
And I started listening to him, and that led me to Milton Friedman, and I got really into economics and free markets. And I thought, gosh, free markets are amazing and what they can do for us. And, I read Wealth of Nations and all that. And then I realized just how strange of an idea from a material sense, right? From the natural world. Who came up with this idea of liberty? Like, what a weird idea. Like, if everything started today and we were just looking around, nobody would say, you know what? We all have inalienable rights. Like, nobody would think that. We would all say, I'm bigger than that guy. That person's smarter than that person. They're beautiful. They're not attractive. They're smart. They're dumb. They're disabled. They're, like, nothing seems equal. Like, inalienable rights sounds insane. And then I thought, what a strange idea, and even stranger that people would fight for that in the Revolutionary War and then deny kingship, like, George Washington, right? I don't want to be king, but I want to protect these liberties. And it's like, what a strange idea. Where did that come from? And then, of course, that came from the Judeo-Christian, tradition of man being made in God's image. And because of this, we have these inalienable rights. And I said, wow, there's some wisdom in the Bible that led to Western civilization. And then I found Jordan Peterson.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Peterson, and I started to respect the wisdom. But what prevented me from moving to fully believing in God and then, of course, in Christ was the leap into the metaphysical. It was the leap into the unseen, right? The through conventional methods not be able to measure and test it. So that was always a struggle. But when I met Bishop Barron, first off, I'll say this, just for anybody listening who wants to help convert other people. The reason why they got me to open up, nobody hammered me, with a Bible on my head or told me this, that. They were just such good people. Like, they were just such good people. I just wanted to be around them. It was a feeling. They were just genuinely wonderful people. I remember I met one of the employees, and then I met his kids and his wife, and he was a young man and with 4 children, and he seemed to be so happy. And, at this time I had 2 kids, stressed out. Like everybody I'm meeting is just so gracious and good, and just, and it kept pulling at me, and I kept getting, feeling something pull at me. And so I started to kind of open up. And I started to learn a little bit more, and I started to attend church here and there. But it wasn't until going through crisis that I really fully accepted Jesus, and that was just some personal struggles I had at the time. I was struggling in my marriage, and those were the first times that I prayed out loud. Never done that before, and some of those initial prayers were very much like, God, I don't know if you're real. I doubt that you exist, but if you're there, I need help believing you. I need help knowing that you're there. I need help with these things, and seeing some things in hindsight were quite obvious, but at the time denying that those were actually God. And then I had an experience, I haven't shared this on any show. I had an experience with my daughter. I have she's now 1.5, but at the time she was 1. And my wife saw some movement pattern issues in her and thought maybe we should get something checked out. We weren't quite too sure. She took her to the doctor. The doctor said she's probably okay, but let's take her to a neurologist. We took her to a neurologist. The neurologist checked her out and said she's probably fine. However, we could get her checked out for something called spinal tethering, which, for people who don't know what that is, it's where the spinal cord anchors too low on the sacrum, and as the child grows, the spine stretches and they lose function of the lower body.
Whoa.
And if you can identify it, then there's surgical procedures to fix it. But in order to identify it, we would have to put my 1-year-old in an MRI machine, which would require general anesthesia. We'd have to put my daughter under and put her in. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to put my daughter under. I know the risks with anesthesia. See your 1-year-old, do that thing, But then at the flip side, if she has spinal tethering, I'm going to want to know.
Right.
So I was in this really scary place. I didn't know what to do. And so we called our pediatrician, and our pediatrician said, I'll do one more like real good, thorough examination, and then I'll tell you if I think we should do an MRI or not. So we said, okay. And I didn't know how this was going to work out, but I said, okay. So the day of the examination, on the way to pediatrician office, I prayed out loud in my car. And it was like, God, I need, help. I don't know, whatever. We get there, and the pediatrician's office said we didn't have an appointment. So we were like, we booked this a month ago. So back and forth, and they said, okay, we made a mistake. Come back later today, and we'll see you guys. So now I'm upset. I'm angry. Whatever. I drive on my way to work here at MindPump Media headquarters. And driving up, we have this parking lot off the side. We're downtown San Jose, and there's a lot of homeless people around. So I'm pulling into the parking lot, and in the middle of the parking lot, there's a homeless man. There's a mattress next to him. His friend's passed out. And there's this homeless guy building a fire, literally building a fire in the middle of the parking lot. And he's got tattoos from his face down and, black fingers from the fire, and he's doing his thing. And I pull in on the other side of the parking lot. And I remembered a talk that I had heard. But remember, I'm praying out loud at this point because I'm really worried about my daughter. And I pull in, and I remembered a talk that I heard from Arthur Brooks. Arthur Brooks, who I mentioned his name earlier. Arthur Brooks, I don't remember what the talk was about, but something came up in his talk about giving homeless people money. And he said, when you do that, one of the things you could do is, rather than just giving them money, ask them to pray for you, because it gives them a sense of meaning. Not just they're taking money, but they're doing something for you.
That's
and I remember
awesome.
and I remember at the time, I was like, wow, that's brilliant. So anyway, I pull in, I look at my rearview mirror, and I see this homeless guy. And I said, maybe I should ask him to pray for me. So I watch him in my rearview mirror for about 5 seconds. And here's this guy building a fire, talking to himself. Guy passed out next to him. And I said, no way. I'm going inside. I'm not going to talk to that guy because I'll get hepatitis or something. There's no way. So I start walking into my studio. Now I'm not even walking by this guy. I'm walking away from this guy. And I hear, excuse me, sir, excuse me. I turn around, and it's that guy. So I walk up to him, and I said, yeah. And he goes, have a nice day. That's what he tells me. So I said, can I ask you for a favor? And he says, sure. And I said, can you pray for me? And he said, yeah. He goes, what's going on? I said, well, we're taking my daughter to the pediatrician today. And he said, does it have to do with her spine?
Whoa.
Yeah. And still gets me. And hit me like a ton of bricks. And I said, actually, it might have to do with something with her spine. And he said, yes, I'll definitely pray for her. And I said, I was going to reach in my wallet and give him some money. And I said, can I give you anything? Is there anything I could do for you? And he said, no, you've done more for me than anybody's done in a long time. And he turned around and walked away, which, by the way, I remembered I had just at this point started reading some scripture, and I remembered Jesus saying something along the lines of, what you do to the least of you, you do to me.
Yeah.
And I walked away. I was shook completely. Went into the studio, sat down, couldn't speak for a good 15 minutes. My co-hosts are like, what's the matter, And I teared up, and I told him what happened. And I knew that was God. I knew it. I knew he reached out to me.
Wow.
So we record a podcast. I get back in the car to go to this doctor's appointment, and I'm praying, and I said, okay, I heard you. I don't know what that means. I don't know what you're telling me, but I hear you. I hear you. We get to the pediatrician's office, and my daughter, first off, is very shy. If she's around strangers, she'll cling to my wife. She won't leave my wife. So already I'm like, I don't know how the pediatrician is going to see anything. My daughter, she's not going to do anything. She's going to stay to my wife or cry if we peel her off. I tell you what, we get there, and my daughter becomes a performer. I mean, pediatrician says, grab this toy, look over here, do this thing. Every single test, she was doing it and acing it and smiling the whole way. And the pediatrician said, for sure she's fine. You guys don't need an MRI.
Wow.
And we left. And that was it.
The other scripture reminds me of is some people entertain angels unaware. It's like, sounds like that was a message right there in response to prayer. So you never know.
Yeah. Well, that was it. At that point, I fully on board. And then ever since then, it's been nothing short of miraculous. Some of the changes in my life and my desires and my wants, and just it's quite remarkable.
That's incredible. So it kind of started with, it's funny, it started with quantum mechanics. Weird enough that kind of helped me out a little bit too, because I read a book by Ed Feser called Aristotle's Revenge. And the point is that that we have you ever read that? Are you familiar?
But I know where that's going. I know where you're going with that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, Aristotle has the idea of act and potency, and Heisenberg, with his uncertainty principle, when he sees some quantum mechanical stuff, he goes, it's proven. Like, there you go. Yeah. So the double slit experiment and a lot of others, it does seem to actually reinforce a lot of philosophical ideas that underpin arguments for God. So that's one that got me. And then economics, I'm huge into economics. I've done a bazillion podcasts on that, and a number of economists on there. There's a very careful mode of thinking that you need when you think economically. You have to think multiple steps ahead.
Yeah.
To take everything into account. You have to think hard about human nature. And once you really work on that, that can actually tool you up to be able to think about, well, what is the human person? You mentioned liberty. it also is pretty weird that when we think about what other people need and respond to that and give before somebody gives us in return, when we actually do that, which is the core of the second greatest commandment, then all of a sudden abundant wealth comes about. It's not like
Yeah,
a prosperity gospel thing. It's like there's some natural order, which means that if we treat others as we would like to be treated in a market, we actually get an incredible amount of wealth. Like, what
yeah,
a wild thing. I mean, yeah, there's fraud, etc., but in general, a more moral people has a lower transaction costs, and they're going to
100%.
have a more thriving economy. Who saw that coming?
100%. Yeah, markets are beautiful. They're not perfect because people aren't perfect, but if you
Sure.
combine a market with a moral society,
Oh, yeah.
the sky's the limit, right? Because markets give us what we want, right? So if we
Hmm.
want, alcohol, cigarettes, and pornography, we're going to get a lot of that. But I think if we combine that with that's kind of where we're at now. I think in society is that markets have done a great job of giving us what we want, and the problem is that we've lost a lot of our moral way. So
Totally.
a lot of what we're getting from markets is not what we need whatsoever, and it's just going to
Hmm.
keep giving us what we want, what we want, what we want. And a lot of people aren't realizing this is not what I need. I may want this. There's a part of me that may want this, but this is not at all what I need. But markets are a great buffer against evil. I mean, I think um, in the past they would impose their will on you by force. Now the best they can do is convince you. So you've got at least that working for you.
It's a big
Um,
upgrade.
a big upgrade, absolutely. But yeah,
Hmm.
it's funny because like I said, markets led me. I mean, I was reading Hayek and Milton Friedman, and Free to Choose was
Nice.
life changing series for me.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah,
We should probably get wrapping up fairly soon, but so we have quantum physics, we have
yeah,
economics, and then it kind of turned into something which a lot of people would think could send you either way, and that is the crisis of what's going to happen to your daughter, right? Like
yeah,
the problem of evil is a main reason why many people stay away from God. But interestingly, people are always saved in scripture through a covenant, and you always see these covenants are like the strongest of which are blood covenants, right? So people are related, or you have a blood
yeah.
sacrifice. And you have the old Middle Eastern tradition that when you want to make a promise and connect yourself with somebody, you cut your
Mm.
hands, both of you. Then you grab onto the other person's wound, and then you actually share the same life. And that kind of shows what's going on in Christianity, in that we have these wounds, we have problems, we have pains, we have issues. And okay, well, where are we going to get the life from? Well, good news, we have a savior who has that wounded palm, and means that actually our wounds can become privileged places of encounter, a life-giving encounter with God. And it sounds like that's exactly what happened, that it opened up a wound to allow you to join the covenant. It wasn't
Well,
one to hurt you, it was actually one to connect you further with Christ. That's
well,
pretty wild.
what was explained to me recently, relatively recent, which I thought was mind blowing, was and I asked, of course, the problem of evil. I asked Bishop Barron that, and I think he did a good job too. He said the line, if we didn't have Hitler, we wouldn't have had Schindler, which I thought was a really good point.
Mm-hmm.
But God uses a different timeline than we do. It's eternity. It's forever. I mean, to conceptualize forever, 1 mile is as far away from infinity as a million miles is, right? So infinity is infinity, and he works through eternity, and that's what we're working for and towards. So although there's no guarantee you're not going to suffer, because I think some people think, well, you believe in God and whatever, but you still suffer. You still, well, that's not the point. The point is eternity. And you have to, and this is, the place I'm at now, and I think every Christian struggles with this, submit to his will, because his will is perfect. Our will is super flawed. If I got what I
Mm-hmm.
wanted, I wouldn't do so well, right? So yeah, that's the challenge. The challenge to explain to the world is you're not going to be it's not going to fix your problems, but you will be filled with joy and love, and it does fix a lot of the problems you create yourself. That's for sure.
That's for sure. Yeah, I have a friend, Pat Flynn. He's also a fitness guy and slash philosopher. And there's a lot of those running around these days, it seems. but he just wrote a book and he deals with the problem of evil, and he points out that, like, in order to get evil, you need so many different things. You need a contingent universe. You need
Yeah.
conscious beings. You need conscious beings which can understand that there's things which are perfective and not perfective for themselves. Like there's a stack of things which are not naturalist and atheist friendly that you need in order to launch the objection of the problem of evil. And I think that's a powerful way. I mean, it's totally possible that we could have evolved in such a way that we were like lobsters, where when we're wounded, we don't actually experience pain and hurt. We just do the right thing.
Mm.
And now we have a conscious qualia of pain, and we have that for a reason. And part of that is because we're actually conscious of what destroys us and what builds us up. And
Yeah.
then we have agency in interacting with the universe in light of that. It didn't have to be that way. But yeah,
Yeah.
Bishop Barron is fantastic. I'll
Yeah.
tell you one quick story.
Yes.
Bishop Barron was kind of in a kerfuffle where people were saying, "Oh, you're a universalist," and Bishop Barron's view is totally within side of Catholic Orthodoxy. But during this, I wrote to him and I said, "Just so you know, all the people coming at you for this, I have a standing offer. That is, you've done so much good for the church. You've helped me so much. Any of these people, I hereby volunteer to fight them in a Waffle House parking lot if they're busting on Bishop Barron." I was told that was a very appreciated comment. So he's
Yeah.
definitely our guy. We like him.
Yeah, he's a good guy, and he's doing great work. And there does seem to be, well, I mean, I think it's pretty undeniable now. There's a cultural shift that seems to be happening. It's becoming cool, for lack of a better term, to say you're a Christian or that you follow Christ, and
Yeah,
that I never remember that being the case. So it seems that God is reaching out and getting people to proclaim this. And I don't know if it's a product of social media, if it's just a sign of, who knows, maybe a reaction to things getting so crazy on the other side. But it does seem to be like this shift that's happening, and it's great to see. It's great to see people talking about these things and it being cool, whereas it used to be shut down immediately, like, oh, you're gonna, type of
sure.
deal. You could talk about crystals and whatever all day long, but you mentioned, Christ, and oh my God. So it's great to see, for sure.
Well, Sal, thanks so much for joining me on the show. I appreciate all you're doing out there, and it
Thank
was
you.
a great chat for sure. All right.